Everybody, welcome to another episode of Age of Quarantine. My name is Chris Enriquez. I am your host. Thanks for spending your Tuesday evening with me. Hope you guys are all being safe out there and staying as positive as you can be during these strange times. Want to thank you also for supporting St. Vitus throughout this tough time. Many of you have been ordering new merchandise and donating when we had the GoFundMe or the Kickstarter rather. I also just want to remind you there is a lot of merchandise out there. So if you go on the St. Vitus store, which just go to the site or right here on Instagram or any of our socials, you'll see the URL to the store. I believe it's a big cartel. Got some new hats, beanies, tank tops, shirts, all sorts of stuff. So, treat yourself. Buy something for your friends or your family during the holidays. It's all gravy. But thanks for the support. And this is an exciting week. We've had a lot of great guests. Before we take a holiday break tonight, I have a friend of mine from the band Husbandry, the lead singer, Carina Zachary, who is also in a really cool group called Monsters of the Horizon. We'll talk about that a little bit. She's going to join us any second now, and we're going to spend the next hour or so talking about how she got started performing, singing, how Husbandry started, all of the good stuff related. Hello.
What's up?
How you doing?
I'm good. You can hear me okay?
Let me turn the volume up on my end. Hold on one second.
All right.
I should have been prepared. All right, keep talking. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you clearly.
Awesome.
All good on my end. You hear me?
Yep, good stuff.
Awesome.
How's everything going over there?
It's going pretty well. I'm out in the sticks right now. I had to escape the grime of New York for a little bit, so I'm out here in Pennsylvania visiting my parents, and it was my mom's birthday last week and Thanksgiving this week, so just a little intimate family situation out here.
That's good timing. Absolutely. I mean, it's tough because if you hadn't gone up there and you had to travel now, it would have been a disaster. So it's good that you're already up there. And is that where you're originally from?
No, actually, I'm from the Bronx, and most of my family, for the most part, live in the Bronx. I've had kind of a migration of family come out here to Pennsylvania over the years. So
okay.
My parents have been living out here for the past 8 years or so.
I'm having a senior citizen board because we talked about this. You told me that once.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a while since we have even, seen each other in person and spoken at all. And I think that goes for most people, with everything that's going on. So this is actually really nice and a welcome, thing, because it's been so long without socializing or seeing people hanging out and stuff.
I feel like we probably won't take it for granted now. I mean, some people don't take it for granted. What I mean is when you're living in a world where we might just run into each other because we're at a show, or something like that, and it doesn't happen anymore. I feel like once we get back to that, it's going to be cool. And
I feel like there is going to be a really big reinvigoration of just going at it 110%, whether it's hanging out with your friends or going to shows or things that we didn't really think about before because we had access to them all the time.
Right, we were spoiled. I mean, I can't even tell you. We're from New York. We live in New York City. We've always had this stuff at our fingertips, and now it's been taken away from us, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, this is cool. I'm glad you are joining me to do this because, like you said, I actually started this because I thought it'd be a cool way to talk to artists and people that are regularly, at St. Vitus, whether it's performing or doing some kind of, live entertainment, and then having an audience for people to engage. It's like the second best thing that we can do when we've been stripped of all this great stuff. What have you been doing to get through this time?
Well, I should say that I am pretty lucky to still have my job. I think that's been a really hard struggle for a lot of people. So that has kept me pretty busy. Also, just brainstorming and trying to stay creative, even though, I haven't been able to get together with my band in that sense of working together and like writing stuff, but just trying to brainstorm and figure out things that I would like to do and when the opportunity presents itself. And also reading a lot, trying to get in the habit of taking care of myself a little bit better, because with the, I guess the lifestyle of like living in New York and hustling a million things, you lose track of yourself as a person, your mental state, your emotional state, your physical state. So I've been trying to make it a habit to really check in with myself and, making sure that I'm okay and doing the things that I need to do, getting more rest, and learning to chill, actually.
Yeah. I couldn't relate to you more. Everything you just said is pretty much mirrored in what's been going on over here too. It's weird. It's like it's time that you can get to focus in a weird way, even though it's kind of like not an ideal way. You get the time to yourself. You can focus on as you summed it up, like chilling, I guess, but like all this like meditative opportunity, whether it's
exactly,
whether you're into cooking or you're playing music or if you're into exercising, all of the above, you're alone a lot of that time. So there's something meditative about it that can really help you kind of come into a different being after all this is said and done. How did the pandemic affect the schedule with your bands? Because your record didn't come out that long ago. I was at your record release show, and and you were starting to tour and do stuff. Like, did you have more things planned when this shit happened?
So the record came out about a year ago, and we did have a few things that we had planned. Our last show was around February of this year, and then in the spring and summer we had a few things that we had planned. I remember there was a big festival in Philly that we were supposed to do that sounded so awesome. And so we had a few things lined up, and it really kind of threw a wrench in our plans. But I mean, what can you do?
Yeah, no, that's unfortunate. What was that? Which festival was that?
It was like a beer festival.
Okay. Was it Decibel?
And,
Was it Decibel? Was it?
No. It wasn't. It was I believe it was like a women of color beer festival.
Okay.
So it was going to be a really tight thing.
I
do
really
hope that. Yeah, I hope that eventually we're able to pull through with that, because that was going to be a really, really cool thing. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I would like to think that everyone who put a lot of hard work into whatever festivals or shows or things that were planned, that they're just simply postponed. I know some things are just canceled completely, but okay, so this whole thing, I always like to kind of focus on positive stuff after we get through that, because like it's an hour where I can kind of dig in. I call it a therapy session, but a public one, so we can go for it. You said you're originally from the Bronx. I'm originally from New York too, and I know that we are we're like we said, we're spoiled because we've had all these venues, and when you tour like you and I have, like you see that in places they don't have as much, right?
Yeah.
How did growing up in the Bronx affect you in terms of like your musical upbringing?
I think that it really made me open-minded to everything, really. I think that the Bronx has such a diverse population of people in terms of like where they're from and the languages that are spoken. I myself am half Dominican, so I grew up, my mom had, a strong passion for like Latin singers and, classical stuff like Juan Gabriel, or a lot of old school Ricky Martin stuff, he's really underrated because people know him for like the mainstream pop bullshit that he does, but he's a phenomenal artist. And then my father, who's Black, a lot of his interests were more in like the grunge scene of like Seattle. So I was listening to a lot of Soundgarden and Alice in Chains, and so I always had like the best of both worlds in that sense. And Michael Jackson was like my idol at 5 years old. So I never felt like I needed to put myself in a box in that sense. And the Bronx, it's like the birthplace of hip hop, right?
Oh yeah.
So it's known for that. But growing up, it was awesome to find other kindred spirits that were more into like heavier music. And, people in the Bronx are very resourceful. So they didn't really have big venues and stuff like that. So they found places where they were able to create a scene. So throughout high school and like my early 20s, there were places like FLC that, that's kind of like the holy grail of like the Bronx and kids in that scene that had like a need for heavy music and shows and community. So places like that really offered, that, and you didn't have to go all the way, to Brooklyn or to the Lower East Side or wherever.
I saw it. I never knew too much about what was going on in the Bronx in like modern time, but there's this great documentary about hip hop. It's about New York City in the 70s, and I wasn't born then, but I thought it was fascinating because, like you said, like they talked about, it's called New York 77, and they talk about hip hop in the Bronx and how it started in the streets with generators, and actually I don't even think it were generators. I think they were plugging into like light posts and like finding ways to get electricity. So it's cool that that you noticed that growing up there, even like past the 70s, that there were ways to DIY, I guess, to DIY. Did your father he obviously had a lot to do with getting you into the grunge stuff that you mentioned. Was he going to see those bands back in the day? And did he take you with him?
Well, he wasn't going out like actively seeing those bands, but he was a very musical person. So we always had instruments around the house. He himself was in like a band, a fledgling band himself. He would sing too. So I grew up around that. And music was also pretty important in that. So my mom, she spoke Spanish fluently, but she didn't really speak English that well. So I felt that was something that really helped us with our bond and to be able to communicate more efficiently as well. So I learned a lot of Spanish through music.
That's awesome. And I was going to comment too. No shame in Ricky Martin. My mother actually worked at Telemundo. So
oh shit, yeah.
Yes, growing up, it was always the Latino pop singer. She loved that stuff. So we'll always bring it up, especially right around this time, around the holidays with the
Christmas stuff. You know it.
Talk about like how because we'll get into husbandry and how you got into the band stuff eventually. But how did you did singing come first for you, or did you get into like talk about like what was first? Like you got into like music and then you started singing right away, or like what was the transition there?
So singing was always my thing. I started singing around 5 years old, and at first it was like I wanted to be like my dad, and we always had music in common. So, he would take me to like his vocal lesson classes and like string me along, but at a certain point, I started to realize that that's what I really wanted to do. Like I wanted to be a performer, but I had terrible, terrible stage fright. Right. And I would never let anyone hear me sing. So I would just lock myself in my room, and I had a little stereo, and I would just sing to myself. If I ever heard any footsteps or anybody coming near that room, I would shut up because I was super shy and I hated the sound of my voice. And it wasn't until I was about 11 or 12 that I was like, all right, if I really want to do this, I need to get over my bullshit. Right. So I started basically doing everything I could to get over the stage fright. So I started taking dance classes. I started doing theater. I started taking art classes. So I did everything basically until I got to a point where I started feeling comfortable on stage. And once I got to high school, I started doing musicals, and I started writing. I took an English class. It was an AP English class, and every Friday the teacher would let us kind of freestyle basically. If you wanted to read a short story in front of the class, or if you wanted to read a poem or whatever, she would give you an hour. the class an hour to kind of just do whatever they wanted. So I started writing poetry, and that was kind of like my testing ground. I was like, all right, if I'm actually good at this, like this is how I'm gonna know.
Yeah, right.
So so yeah, so I started getting up and just like, you know, reading my poetry, and I started seeing reactions to it. And at the time I got really into Thursday, and
Yeah. The band.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I was always struck by Jeff Rickley's ability to write lyrics and to explore self-identity. And I got super existential around that age. And I was like, all right, so this is a vehicle that I can use to understand myself and the world around me. And I started kind of making the transition from poetry into songwriting.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. I kind of like almost assumed for some reason that maybe you had some kind of theater background.
Yeah.
So I think it does translate in like
Mm-hmm.
in your performance, seeing you live.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guessing you sang in musicals too.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you have a good knack for harmony and when you layer vocals on the recordings, which is rad. So you're trained.
In a sense, I haven't really ever taken like a straight up like vocal lesson, even though
Yeah.
I would probably benefit. Everybody should. Um, but my training, so to speak, was all of the music that I was listening to. So I feel like as a vocalist, everything started with like imitation, and then I started really focusing on singers that I loved and what, you know, set them apart. Singers like Chris Cornell, Nina Simone, like as soon as you listen to them, you know who it is. So
Yeah.
I wanted to be like that, and I wanted to find my own style, and it wasn't necessarily about being the best technically, but it was about finding like my niche.
Yeah.
And I come from like an R&B soul kind of background. That's the music that I started doing before I got into heavy music.
Yes.
So I always wanted to keep like the DNA of that in whatever I did, you know, with rock and like heavy
Absolutely.
music.
Yeah, that's cool. And I mean, just listing someone like Chris Cornell, who is in my opinion like basically a blues singer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
that's a really interesting person to kind of point out that was in heavy rock bands, so to speak, where his vocals, if he wasn't singing like that in Soundgarden and someone else was, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be you know what we have now know to be that sound. So it's kind of
Exactly. And sorry to cut you off, but like that's kind of like when it clicked in my head that I could marry these two passions of mine, because until then I hadn't really like come across somebody that I really gravitated to, that, you know, really showed me that I could keep that, you know, basis of melody and soul and R&B and still like, you know, be a beast with like, you know, the heavy music.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's cool to hear you kind of answered some of the questions I had already about vocalists and whatnot. But so when it came to the heavy music beyond what your father got you into, like how did you discover underground music? When did that enter your life? You talked about Thursday a little bit, so maybe that.
Yeah. So funny story. So there was a an FYE around my school. I went to Kennedy High School, John F. Kennedy in the Bronx, and that was kind of like the music store that we had around there. And what ended up happening is that, so I went to a school with like 5,000 kids, and I floated seamlessly in every social circle you can imagine. So I would go from like the theater kids to like the dudes that were trading PlayStation games to, you know, the bilingual kids on the fifth floor, um, to like the skater and punk kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I started hanging out with those kids a lot, and we would go to, you know, local shows, and a lot of those kids were in bands as well. And once I started going to those shows, I was like, oh shit, like this is actually pretty fucking cool. And my thing was that my qualm was that I didn't see enough girls there, and I never saw enough girls in bands either. And I would try to like audition to be in like friends' bands and would get kind of brushed off or whatever. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take my time. I'm gonna hone my skills. I'm gonna figure out a way to do this shit because I can do it, and I can probably do it better than they are.
I love that. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something about, I hate to harp on it so much, but you know what I'm talking about. There's something about a New York attitude that I notice, like, sometimes is like, it's competitive in a good way. It's a, you know,
It is. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
some people can take it the wrong way, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But when I think when you're a New Yorker, you kind of get it. It's like, um, you really kind of feel like the need to rise above,
Yeah.
maybe depending on where you grew up or how you grew up, and there's something more meaningful about, you know, being recognized for your talent.
Yeah. It's like it does derive a little bit from like, you know, the hip hop mentality. It's a very like
Yes,
you
that's what I'm trying to.
hustle, like you just hustle. And the more you hear no, the more you want to do something. And that's my personality in general. The more somebody tells me I can't do something, the more I really want to do it. Not to prove to them, but to prove to myself that I can do it.
Yeah.
And I'm always both inspired and pushed by, you know, other bands and other people in the scene. Not in the sense that like, oh, like, you know, I want to be better than this person. More in the sense of like, wow, like this person really does this shit well. So I got to
Yeah.
step my game up.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's that's where the inspiration will come from, I think, in a scene. You know,
Yeah.
obviously. What about so when and how did Husbandry start? I feel like the band has been around for a while now, right?
It has, yeah, yeah.
Has it been around since high school?
No, actually. So those guys, so the three of them, Jordan, Andrew, and and Arnell, they were playing before I joined the mix. So I
Okay.
think they had been playing for around a year before I joined, which was like late 2013 or so.
Okay, okay. I don't know why I
Yeah,
thought you guys. All right. So
yeah.
it's
So
2013.
I didn't meet them until then. And at the time, I wasn't even really looking for a band to be in. I had just, I guess my previous band had dissolved, and I wanted to just get back to basics and just get back to writing R&B and more blues and soul influenced stuff. So I was actually just looking for a guitarist on Craigslist, you know, the most reliable.
Yeah, yeah, right. Which can be a disaster sometimes.
It could be.
Yeah.
But I found an ad, you know, where a band was looking for a singer, and I started reading their influences, and I think they put like Deftones and like Mars Volta, and I was like, this could be really interesting.
Yeah.
And like everything in my head was screaming like, not another fucking band, like nah, you need a break from that shit. But you know, I was like, I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna give it a shot and see like what happens. And we started communicating, and they had already been playing. They had auditioned a bunch of other singers and went through like different iterations of that band. But they also had recorded instrumental stuff for like reference, and they sent me a couple of tracks, and I was like, all right, I'll write to one of them. And then I wrote to one of the tracks, and I did a little bootleg recording at home and sent it to them, and then met them in person. We played the song, and I was like, all right, you have your singer. Call off the search.
Oh shit. Okay.
You're
Okay.
my band now.
You just felt immediate connection.
I did. And the thing with them is that they are so committed to what they do, and um, that was the first group of guys that I had ever really worked with that I felt and I saw like the dedication and um, I don't know, they seemed really serious about what they were doing, and they were just really great, you
Yeah.
know. And I was
Yeah.
like,
No, of
I
course.
was a little bit intimidated, to be honest. And I was like, all right, like this is actually good because me being in the mix with people like that's just gonna push me to get better. And it has over all of these years, you know, I've grown so much as a vocalist and writer, and I owe a lot of that to them.
Definitely. I mean, for one thing, like what I do know about those guys is that they're all super chill. All of you guys are very chill
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
No one really seems like a hothead or anything like that. So that's a
yeah,
good kind of sign for a band right off the bat.
yeah.
But they're also again like I think that you guys are obviously challenging each other because yeah, I've seen Jordan, who is a guitar wizard, and he works
Mm-hmm.
at the Music Zoo. Uh,
Yes.
actually very close to where I grew up. And so, you know, he's always all about the pedals and all the
Oh
crazy
yeah, no, he's
prog
that
stuff.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah, he's that guy. And then Arnell is a fucking nasty bass player.
Yeah.
He's busy, and your drummer Andrew, I've never seen anyone play like him. So it's like you're all kind of coming from
We're all
different.
weirdos, bro. Like we
Yeah,
are so fucking weird.
yeah,
And then it's interesting because sometimes I myself, I'm like, yo, how the fuck? Because we come from different backgrounds in general, you
yeah.
know, and also like musical backgrounds. So it's always very interesting to figure out ways to marry all of our identities into something that actually works.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, that's what creates originality at the end of the day. I mean, there's always different ways of looking at a band. There's the band that puts out the same record and everyone likes it, and it's
Right.
fine to leave them that way. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
the band that's Mars Volta, which is obviously out there, and you have salsa and some punk and
Exactly. Yeah.
all sorts of shit going on.
Yeah.
What's the why don't you talk about like the band influences, even though that's like generic, and maybe you could kind of go into I'm looking at questions that I wrote, by the way.
Yeah.
I've been told that I look like I'm like looking at something else, but maybe talk about the band influences and then the creative process into how you kind of how a typical song comes together,
Well, I mean, I feel like our influences are all over the place. I know for a fact Jordan loves hip hop. I mean, he's a Queens guy, so
Yeah, there you go.
yeah. And Arnell, he's into a lot of like experimental stuff and black metal, you know.
Okay.
And Andrew, I feel like Andrew has similar tastes to Jordan, but then again, they've been playing since they were in high school, I believe, and so they're very in sync
Yes.
musically. And I'm kind of into everything, to be honest. Like I'll get inspiration from, classical music, from Latin music, and then like the more well-known shit, like Deftones is like that's my shit,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I
Some
love
trip hop
Deftones.
too.
Yeah, Massive Attack. Like
Yes,
I love that.
that was one of the best shows I ever saw, and you
Mm-hmm.
right behind me.
Yes, it was
Yeah,
awesome seeing you there too.
yeah.
That was awesome. Cause like Steve, he had gotten I think tickets to the show the day before, if I'm not mistaken. And then so I ended up getting tickets for that day, and I was by myself, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just have a good time, and if I see people, I see people. But it was great to spot you
Yeah, hell yeah.
there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think we were both sitting by ourselves.
Yeah.
That's so the all right, so you guys put out your first record in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
What were the early sort of like getting out, playing shows? Where were you playing shows? What was the vibe? Like how all that was sort of coming together?
My very first show with them was at Knitting Factory, actually. And it was kind of a spur of the moment thing. It wasn't planned. I think we got that show very last minute, but it was kind of a great first show, venue to test it out because
Yeah.
the sound was good there, and yeah, I mean it was there were a lot of like different places that we played. I think we played one of our worst shows at Paperbox. Is that even in existence anymore? Paperbox? Do you remember that place?
I don't know. Is it? I know.
I don't think so.
I always get that place mixed up with Isn't there a place called Pine Box also?
Is it that? I don't even know. Maybe.
I think it's in Bushwick. I know what you're talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. The sound was shitty there. I was drunk off my ass. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it happens.
And we had played a show also at a spot called Radio Bushwick that is no longer in existence.
Yeah, it's not there anymore. I know that.
Yeah, that was a fun
Wyckoff.
show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a lot of like local spots, and with local bands, and I think it was the perfect kind of training ground, to be honest, because it was all of these like local kids, and a lot of the equipment wasn't that great, and it was like, all right, like if you can make it work with this shit, then you'll be Gucci.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
about the first times you guys were starting to go out of state? I know we'll get into
Hmm.
tours, but like what were the earlier out of state gigs all about?
So, I mean, it was pretty much the trifecta. It was Philly, it
Yeah,
was Boston. I think once or twice we hit up DC. But yeah, those are like the perfect like weekend getaways because all of us work. So when we started testing things out, that those were the places that we went out to.
those are great cities when it comes to just the music scene,
Yeah.
music community too. The
Hmm.
so then you put out "Bad Weeds Never Die." I remember that particularly with the "I Love Blonde Redhead," and you did that cover. Uh,
Hmm.
um, they're not from New York, but they moved here, and I know they're New York based, which is a band that I really enjoyed always going to see. Um, you know, 15, 20 years ago when they played more often.
Hmm.
What was the how did what was the decision making there to do that cover? I also want to talk about the remix on that record that John from Candiria did.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, that was
So
a good one.
we actually, for a while, I think we even had like a little spreadsheet going to see what the cover was gonna be.
Okay.
And it was super hard to like narrow it down. But I think all of us, once we heard that song, we were like, okay, this is something that we can put our own twist to, but not like completely alienate people who are aware of this song and love this song.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be really interesting too because it was a challenge for me to incorporate vocals that are a little bit more subdued and a little bit more gentle and figuring out how to be vulnerable but powerful, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was a big challenge for me. It's very easy, I guess, for me to like go straight to the belting and like, the aggressive stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a challenge to like hold yourself back and like be very calculated in how you know, uh, express the different dynamics,
For
of your
sure. But
voice.
it's because you didn't write it. I guess that
Mhm. Mhm.
like it's almost like doing theater in a way.
Yeah.
But with the freedom to interpret it, and I mean, I guess in theater you're going to interpret it in your own way
In
all
your
the time.
own way. Exactly.
It's a play, right? So,
Mhm.
um, which is interesting, and I thought it was a good cover. My favorite covers are when people are able to recreate something
Mhm.
so far removed sometimes from what the song originally was that you might not even write. Those are my favorite covers because then what's the point, you know?
Yeah, and then that song it became very difficult actually for me to perform it live because it always made me emotional.
Yeah,
It once we finished that song, I think a little bit before my grandfather passed away from pancreatic cancer.
yeah.
And something about that song is so devastating that I think we only performed it maybe once or twice, and it was always super difficult for me to get through it
Wow.
because
Yeah,
it's such a cathartic song.
it's dark. I mean,
Hmm.
your guys' music is dark at times as well, but their catalog and that song in particular is very dark
Yeah.
and dark and beautiful at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, but John, our friend John from Candiria, who goes under the Spilacopa name, great talented dude. He's
Hmm.
that dude I could talk about forever because he, in my opinion, is a New York legend that really Candiria, had they not had to stop the band for a while, probably would have been, bigger than Dillinger Escape Plan. And just, I think they would have been headlining Terminal 5. You know
Yeah,
what I
and they
mean?
were they were actually one of the first like, recognizable bands that were super welcoming and open to us. And we opened for them at Gold Sounds
Mm-hmm.
when they were doing that like 5 world tour, which was fucking that concept was awesome. I thought that was so sick.
Ballsy and a
um
great concept at the same time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And even aside from that, I would bump into John at like different events, a few events here and there, and he was always super friendly and just nice. And I don't know, like it's awesome when somebody is great at what they do, and they're a legend musically, but for them to also be like a great person, and just somebody that, I don't know, is so approachable. I thought that was really cool. I've always thought that he's
Yeah,
super
no,
cool.
absolutely.
Hmm.
He did a great job on that remix, and Candiria also shares something in common with Husbandry, which is that the eclectic mix of styles. We
Hmm.
have even on their last record, there's this song with like a swing part, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, that I was going to ask you about that show. That was a great bill. You know, let's talk about another band that you guys are friends with, and one of the members produced "A Port in a Storm," which is Moontooth.
Hmm.
All the bands we're talking about, I think, have something in common without sounding like each other, which is that like sort of like 1 second this is happening and this is,
Yeah, yeah.
you know. Um,
Yeah.
how did the relationship with Moontooth start, and what role did? Please fill in the blanks here. I cannot remember the name of the member that worked with.
Ray.
What's his name?
Ray.
Ray. That's right.
Hmm.
So how did that relationship start, and what role did he have in producing A Port in a Storm?
So Moontooth was also one of the first bands that we started playing around with, and we ended up doing a 16-day tour with them. So we got to spend a lot of time with them, and that tour was awesome just because it really opened my eyes to how much, how these guys work their asses off.
Yeah.
These guys are like one of the hardest working people that I've ever met,
Yeah.
And so that was super inspiring, and it just so happens that, Ray, has works at Westfall Recordings,
The
which is
studio.
in Long Island. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And
Long Island
so,
boys.
huh?
The Long Island guys.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it kind of made sense when we were working on like putting this together. It was kind of a no-brainer to do
Yes.
it there. And it was a great experience. It was a great experience working with him and with Anthony, who like I worked very closely recording vocals with, because we weren't recording at the same time. So the band recorded their parts first, and then I went out there and I actually stayed over. Like I slept over one night,
Yeah.
and I went over a couple of nights, and then I slept over one night to record vocals there. So I worked very closely with Anthony on
That's
vocals, and it turns out that he's a really big Ariana Grande fan.
okay.
So when it comes to the vocal layering on that album, like we were like this. We were like, all right, we're there. We're gonna just
Yeah.
fucking layer the fuck out of this shit.
Yeah,
And so that was cool.
that's my favorite record. I mean, when I
Mm-hmm.
heard that, I felt like you kind of came into like a new realm. I feel like some
Yeah.
bands have that moment where they finally put out a record, and like you might have liked all the records before, but everything kind of congeals
Yeah, and
in
I feel like I definitely felt it as well, because the like writing for that album was very like heavy for me as well. I was going through a lot of things personally, and it's interesting because that year that I recorded that, it had probably been the most productive year that I had had musically.
Yeah.
And it was the year that I actually started questioning myself, and really, I guess as an artist, you go through like these stages where like one minute you're like riding high, like super confident in what you're doing, and you hit these points where you're like, you doubt yourself, and you kind of question like who you are as an artist, and if your judgment is right in terms of like what you're putting out there.
Right.
And there was also, it's very, very strange because it's hard to describe it, but I feel like on a spiritual level, I was already starting to feel the things that were coming in terms of the world.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of the songs have a little bit of an undertone of kind of like sensing that there's some bad shit coming, but you can't really put your finger on it.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And I was trying to like figure that out too. Like, what is this that I'm feeling, and how do I put this into words? and how do I make it make sense, because I myself don't even know what the fuck I'm talking about, but I feel it.
I think it's also kind of depending on like who you talk to. I know for myself, I think the nature of a lot of the music community that I think we live in. To me, there's a lot of talk of like what's going on in the world and social, whether it's the environment or social politics and social unrest rather. So even before any of this, not to get off on a complete tangent, I think that like I've had many conversations with like how this entire world and our country specifically is just has not been heading in the right place for quite some time. So
it's like we took a wrong turn, like we were supposed to go right and we went left, and it's like shit.
Right.
But I think in general, as artists, whether you're the kind of person that is interested or not in like politics or whatever, is going on in the world, artists, I feel, innately have this ability to really observe and kind of be more in tune with, what's happening and the state of just the state of being human, so it's kind of like in our nature to observe anyway and to incorporate those things into our music, regardless, whether it's like a booty popping song or, some heavy ass shit, like you're still reflecting the world that you live in.
Absolutely. Speaking of, would you say booty pop and shit?
Yeah.
Let's talk about monsters on the horizon.
Yes.
It's a good segue. Yeah, that's the other thing
that was smooth, Chris. That was smooth.
I mean, it's a little different from
Husbandry. Yeah.
What's that all about?
So, Husbandry is actually a big reason why Monsters came to be, because Steve, which is essentially the founding member of Monsters, that show that Husbandry played at Radio Bushwick, Steve just happened to be there. And not because he was going to see the band, but because he was trying to check out the venue for a DJ event that he had been a part of, that he was going to be a part of. And he ended up catching us by chance, and we ended up bumping into each other at the bar and started talking about music and stuff. And we had a lot of the same influences, and we exchanged information, and he was like, oh, I'm working on like some more beat oriented stuff, and it would be cool if we could work together sometime. And I was like, all right, cool. Like I have a little bit of music ADD, so like, I'm always working on things that don't necessarily belong with each other. So
sure.
Yeah, looking for like other vehicles to do stuff. And I was like, all right, cool. And it wouldn't be, until maybe like 2 or 3 years later, he would routinely send me stuff like tracks that he was working on, and I would check them out or whatever. But I think around 2 or 3 years after we met, he sent me a batch of songs that I checked out, and I was like, all right, this is it. This is what I want to write to, and this is what we can work on, because it really hit what I envisioned, working on with him. And we ended up getting together. It was only supposed to be one song. And we got together at like a little room at the sweatshop, and he brought the track, and I was just like, all right, loop it. Just keep looping it. And I think within half an hour or so, we wrote our first song. And
it's more the hip hop it's more the hip hop meets R&B tip.
Yeah, so it's like it's a combination of like trap, hip hop, trip hop.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of like electronic sounds, and it's super like gothy and like, like dark. Seductive and dark. Yeah.
For sure.
And so and he had been working on the side with another vocalist, and he had shown me the work that he did with him. The guy is Sean, and he's like a rapper vocalist. And I heard the track that they worked on, and I was like, I want to do a song with that guy, because he's fucking awesome. I love the tone of his voice, and it would be really sick. And yeah, we all kind of met each other. We started working on songs together. Eventually, we added a live drummer who had been friends with Steve for years.
I don't think I saw the drummer with you guys at the time. No. I could be wrong.
Was
Maybe
he there?
you there?
I think he was at that show.
Oh, maybe he was there. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think I was still
he
drinking
had the
back then.
baby
So.
head. I don't know if he wears this baby head that's like
You know what? He was
insane.
there. He
I
was
don't know how he plays in that, but he's a beast.
there.
And it really added a great element to the band because we started dipping into more, like it added like that raw like rock vibe to it. So it kind of just elevated the whole thing, and yeah, it became a full-fledged band.
There's a bunch of stuff online. I think some videos, YouTube, and there's stuff on. There's not much on Spotify, right? Or there's some. But...
We had more stuff, but we took it all down to kind of start from scratch. So we have 2 songs up on there. One is Blurry, and one is Mr. Scary. And we do have some goodies coming in 2021. We also have a cover up. It's a cover of Crawling by Linkin Park.
Oh yeah, I heard that. That was really good. And Steve, really quick, not to get. I've told you this. I grew up.
I know. I love it.
Yeah, and the owner of St. Vitus too. So already the owner of St. Vitus and Steve from Monsters on the Horizon were in punk bands that I saw. Some of the first shows I ever saw, I was 14 years old, and they were probably 19 or 20. Which I always joke with my friends in scene years. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and Steve is a vampire. I mean,
yeah,
he's a freaking vampire. It's so weird.
We have the good genes. We're a little Hispanic. I got a little.
Yeah,
but that's a good thing. So. I wanted to ask briefly, because we got like about 15 minutes left, and I want to touch upon a few things. But lyrically, obviously, you must have different approaches for Husbandry versus Monsters on the Horizon. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So the process is very different with both. So with Husbandry, the guys will usually work out their parts together, and there'll be sometimes where I will sit in on those just to get to like the bones of what they're trying to create, but most of the time I'll take that home and kind of digest it and talk to it, figure out where it wants to go and how I can slither my way into the track and find my way through it. And I think that's the challenging part of working on music with Husbandry, because every single song that they write, my first thought is, how the fuck am I going to write to this?
Totally. I when I listen to them, like I imagine the challenge that you have. With how am I supposed to put melody on it, and you figure it out.
Yeah, right? yeah. It works itself out, and a lot of the times I end up surprising myself, and I end up having to challenge myself, because sometimes I will hear how I want something to sound in my head, and I can't necessarily sing it because it's not, within my register, or it's out of my comfort zone vocally. So sometimes, the guys will be like, well, you should change it here, and maybe you can adjust it here. And a lot of the times I won't budge, because I'm like, all right, I hear it this way, I'm going to teach myself to do it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's
and so a lot of the times with every project we come out with, I tend to, get out of my comfort zone and explore a vocal avenue that I probably wouldn't have if the music didn't, call for it.
Right.
Yeah.
But with Monsters, I mean, lyrically though, so I'm going to tie this into a question about music videos, because the music videos for Husbandry, some of them are, kind of raising some awareness on social issues, political issues. Some of them are more sort of obscure art. And so I would imagine, and then on the flip side, Monsters is kind of like, I mean, I can't speak to it, to your band, but like definitely more of like a party. It might be dark, but like it's also something you would go and party.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And a lot of that is intentional. So going back to the writing process with Monsters, the way that we work is a little bit more immediate. Not just because the music itself, a lot of it is electronic, so it's easier to just record to there right then and there. But Sean and I have a working relationship where we're able to kind of feed off of each other lyrically and just write immediately. So there are times where we'll go, to the studio just to hang out, and Sean will start rapping something, and I'm like, oh shit, it's triggering something. So I'll either like start writing there, riffing off of what he's doing, or I'll go into a separate room, and then when we come together, things kind of fall into place, and we'll record it right then and there. So it's a much more like immediate process.
Plus, you're working with another vocalist.
Exactly, and Steve also sings too. So it's a very interesting dynamic, learning to share vocal duties and to, you know, weave in and out of vocals with each other. And then in terms of like the music itself, it is very intentional that a lot of the songs are like dancey and upbeat with very dark undertones. A lot of the lyrical content, you know, deals with, you know, depression and you know, alienation, a lot of topics that aren't necessarily something that you think of when you think of, you know, dancey poppy songs. And it's awesome to kind of do that, because you kind of slither your way into people's consciousness while they're not even, you know, conscious of it. So they might be vibing to like the sounds and like dancing and stuff, but if they listen to it a couple of times, they'll end up getting a totally different message than what they thought they would.
I love that. And it's cool just to have different outlets as an artist. I find that really important in terms of, you know, the difference between musicians can sometimes be a hired gun, you songwriter, or you're just a really talented person and you want to experiment in different avenues, you know. That's something that I can relate to, because I have my hardcore band and then my normal band. Now, while since we're on the St. Vitus channel, why don't you about 2 minutes to late night, because you did the Trooper with Mutoid Man, and that band is wild.
That was probably one of the best things I've ever done in life, because it was such a fun experience. And you know, I respect all of those guys. I think they're so amazing.
Oh, hell yeah.
Musically, and they're also great people. I love that, you know. And Jordan, like, I love Jordan as well, and I had been a huge fan of the show, and as soon as he told me, I was like, yes, I'm there. I will do whatever I need to do it.
So he reached out to you? I was going to ask you how that happened.
Yeah. He hit me up and he was like, I got this song, like, I think you'd be great for it. And you know, Iron Maiden, man, like, wow. I was a little intimidated, because I was like, yo, I want to do it, but like I want to do it justice. And you know, and I love the concept too. So I was like, I need to do this thing. And it ended up being awesome. It was such a great experience, and it was so fun, especially like, you know, sometimes like working on music with like Husbandry can be a very serious thing. My personality in terms of like performing and stuff with Husbandry is much more serious and much more dramatic, you know.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, so it was great to just be able to have fun with it, and, you know, be silly and still like do such a powerful ass song, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I could see why he reached out to you, because if you're going to do a metal song, Bruce Dickinson's voice,
he's ridiculous, man.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Yeah. The range and the highs and lows. I mean, he sounds like he could be in theater too, if you really think about it. Like Phantom of the Opera type shit.
Exactly, you know? The quality of his voice, and, you know, you gotta project, man. You gotta fucking project if you're gonna sing Iron Maiden.
Yeah, that dude's not. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think that dude is, you know, smoking cigarettes and drinking whiskey before he goes on stage. Nah. I mean, the whiskey maybe, I don't know, but.
Well, you know what? I like my Jameson.
Yeah.
I like my Jameson, and, you know, it does help loosen up the vocals.
Right, that's right.
But you never want to overdo it, you know. You got to get your rest, and you got to take care of yourself.
You have a smooth voice as well, not a raspy one, you know.
Yeah.
With that cover, real quick, that's on YouTube. I know that. And weren't you guys? What was the theme? Weren't you guys wearing like costumes or something?
So, I think. We were supposed to all kind of be on the same wavelength in terms of costumes, but throughout the day, Jordan was looking for, you know, I forget what it was, and either like we couldn't find the right size, or like the right theme or whatever, and then he was like, listen, you know, let's just do, there's this Power Rangers thing. So like, if you want to do that, like, just get the White Ranger suit and we're out. And I'm like, you know what? I like it. And I was like, I'm gonna specifically find one with a helmet because that entrance, it's gotta be on point. And I'm glad it worked out the way that I envisioned it, because that moment with the reveal is just, I love that.
So you were a Power Ranger.
I was the White Ranger, yes.
Okay. Was the band dressed up like Power Rangers too?
No, they were dressed up as Austin Powers.
Okay. Oh,
it was like the most ridiculous, but like the most amazing thing ever. So
that's really funny. Well, yeah, this has been fun. I can't believe like that it's been an hour.
That went by way too quick.
Yes, yeah.
It always does when you're having fun, man.
Well, we hopefully can do this in person
Yes.
at some point. We should. But is there anything happening that you want to shout out or announce or tell anybody? By the way, anybody watching, so this is going to be on the St. Vitus IGTV, so that anyone can watch it anytime.
And shout outs to Vitus. Like I miss just being at Vitus terribly.
Seriously.
I've had like so many great moments, not just playing, but like going to shows or going to the dance parties. Like that's church. Vitus is church.
It really is. Yeah, it's where a lot of people met and kind of started this cool little community that we have, this culture. And I love that we can kind of keep it alive in a little way here.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that anybody watching is going to be able to watch this in full if they missed any part of it from the beginning on the IGTV and on my YouTube channel. If you just look up my name. Chris Enriquez,
my mom is gonna request a replay of this, so I'm gonna have to.
So good stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Let's talk again soon.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Take care of yourself.
To the boys. All right. Take care. Peace out.
Bye.
Later. Thanks everybody for watching. Really appreciate it. That was a lot of fun. And pick up the St. Vitus merch on the website, on the Big Cartel, if you want to pick up some stuff for the holidays. And definitely listen to Carina's band Husbandry and Monsters of the Horizon. Check out their videos, support artists, and have a happy holidays. We will not be doing the show tomorrow or the next day. We'll be back on Friday.